and welcome to Alan History Nerd. In this video I'm going to look at the Battle of Marathon, and this is primarily aimed at helping students studying A-level ancient history. Now, the Battle of Marathon was a really significant battle, not only in European but world history, and it took place in 490 BC in between the Persians and the Greeks. So just a little bit of context on this. So there had been some Greek support for the Ionian Revolt, 499 to 493. In 492, Mardonius led a Persian expedition into northern Greece, aiming to attack and punish Eritrea and Athens, who had supported the Ionians during their revolt. The expedition had had some success, but also some setbacks, and failed to reach either Eritrea or Athens. So Mardonius had returned back to Persia. In 491, Darius, the king of Persia and the Persian Empire, sent heralds to all Greek states demanding earth and water, which are symbols of the states submitting to Persian rule. Some Greek states did; they Medized, and Medizing is submitting to Persian rule. Others did not, most notably the Athenians and Spartans, who threw the heralds into a pit and a well, respectively, the story of which is told in Book 6, Chapter 133 in Herodotus. In 490, Darius invaded Greece, aiming to add it to his empire and to extract revenge on Eritrea and Athens in particular for helping the Ionian Revolt. Eritrea was sacked, its temples burnt, and people were enslaved, having been betrayed by two citizens on the seventh day of fighting. And again, this is in Herodotus, Book 6, Chapter 101. Moving on to the preparations for the battle then. So Marathon was a place in Attica, most suitable for riding horses closest to Eritrea, we are told by Herodotus, Book 6, Chapter 102.1. The Persians were guided by former Athenian tyrant Hippias. Again, this is Herodotus, Book 6, Chapter 107.1. The Athenians marched there, led by 10 generals, including Miltiades. Again, this is Herodotus, Book 6, Chapter 103, Part 1. The Athenians sent a herald, Philippides, a long-distance runner, to Sparta for help. They agreed that they would go and help, but only once the religious festival was over, and details on this are in Herodotus, Book 6, Chapter 105.1 to Book 6, Chapter 106.3. Now, the Persians landed in the Bay of Marathon near the Great Marsh, where there was good grazing for their horses, and they set up their army ready there. The Greeks, made up largely of Athenians and Plataeans, held a secure defensive position covering the two routes to Athens, a coast road and a hill path. They had good water supply, they had the hills at their back, and the coverage of some trees in front of them. So the Greeks were in a good defensive position. The key bit we want to stop the Persians getting to, which is the routes to Athens we have behind us, and we can defend here. Now, the Athenian generals were divided on whether to attack or not. Miltiades was the key voice in favour of attacking. The deciding vote, however, fell to Callimachus, who Miltiades persuaded that attacking was the best course of action. And all the details of this is in Herodotus, Book 6, Chapter 109.1 through to Book 6, Chapter 110.1. And in there you can get some of the ins and outs and the impassioned speech that Miltiades makes in winning over the key figure, the key deciding vote on whether the Athenians should attack the Persians or not. In the battle, the Persians crossed the Chadara stream with the bulk of their forces and faced the Greeks. Then cavalry was notably absent. It's believed that the cavalry had been moved onto the ships, ready for a surprise attack on Athens, because the Persian plan was to engage the Athenians and Plataeans in battle at Marathon, and then send their ships round and take the city once the Athenians have been defeated, and hopefully kind of hit them in a pincer movement. Milesiades noted that its absence, the absence of the cavalry, and this played into the timing of the Greek attack. He said, well, actually, the cavalry's not there. This is the moment to attack them. Callimachus commanded the right wing, as was tradition. The Plataeans the left wing, and the Greeks stretched their line much longer than it normally would do. So it kind of matched the length of the Persian forces. And unusually, the Greek army was weakest at its centre. All right, now Herodotus gives the details of this book 6, chapter 111.1 to 111.3. Now, the Athenians attacked the Persians at a run. They charged them. And this is a really unusual thing to do. The hoplites were normally kind of they're very heavily armoured. They're normally fairly slow moving. But they actually attack on the run. This was an unexpected and unusual tactic. It's really important as it surprised the Persians. So they weren't expecting an element of surprise. Was really key in these battles. It also had a big impact on their archers because one of the strengths of the Persian army was their archers. Obviously, the bowmen are effective from a distance, but hoplites can get close up with their javelins and things, and the archers become less effective. Bowmen become less effective. And details of this are in Herodotus, book 6, chapter 112.1 to 112.3. In the battle, then, the Greeks knew the strongest Persian units would be at the centre, and these elite Greek units broke the Greek line. Again, this is in Herodotus, book 6, chapter 113.1. But these troops, as they then break through the Greek line then can pull in from the flanks and encircle the Persian army. And the Greeks won a great victory, and the numbers then Herodotus gives in terms of the numbers killed is maybe a bit large, and on one side a bit small, and the other to kind of be truly believable. But Herodotus tells us 6,400 Persians were killed, and only 192 Athenians. This is in Herodotus, book 6, chapter 117.1. I've got my doubts on those numbers, but they are the numbers Herodotus gives us. Facing defeat, the Persians fled into the marshes and into the sea to their ships, and many of them were cut down and killed as they fled into the marshes, and again into the sea, which obviously is going to slow them down. We're told by Herodotus that the Athenians overpowered 7 ships. The Persians picked up their Etruscan slaves and fled in the rest of the boats heading for Athens. Herodotus, book 6, chapter 115.1. The Athenians then quickly marched back to defend their city, beating the Persians there. Seeing that the Athenians were there to defend the city when the Persians arrived, essentially they decided to give up and head back to Asia. And this is Herodotus, book 6, chapter 116.1. So that is very briefly the detail of what happened. So why did the Athenians and Plataeans win at Marathon? Well, partly it was the leadership of Callimachus, who died in battle, and the advice of Milesiades, and he is the guy who Herodotus in particular gives the credit to for the leadership of the Greeks in this battle. Marathon was a good choice of ground for the Athenians, giving them control over the timing of their attack. Obviously, strategically, it's an entry point into Attica. It also you've got those 2 paths, the different land routes leading to Athens, and which gave them the opportunity to block those off. The absence of the Persian cavalry was an important part of the story. The surprise charge, again, is linking to the tactics and leadership of the Greeks, was seemingly a masterstroke, as was engulfing the strong Persian centre by thinning out the Greek centre and putting more power on the wings. The Greek hoplites were better disciplined and better equipped. So the discipline may be a bit of a surprise since this was an army made up, a citizen's army. The better equipped obviously made a big difference. They got the bronze visored helmets, the solid bronze breastplates, and shields and javelins. So these are heavily armoured, really well equipped troops, and this compares with The Persians, who had things like wicker shields, which are not going to be much use against the bronze javelin, and leather vests, some of which had scales thrown into them for extra protection. But essentially, they're nowhere near as well armoured as the Greeks. You could argue that the Greeks were better motivated. They were fighting for their freedom. We've already seen what had happened to Eritrea. It had been sacked, the temples had been burnt, the people had been enslaved. So the Athenians and others, they are going, right, well, this is us, this is Athens next. If we don't win, then they are going to sack Athens. They're going to burn our temples. They're going to enslave us and our families. And so that's what they were fighting to defend. There's also an argument that the Persians rushed their actions in fear of the Spartan arrival, because we said earlier Sparta had said it was going to come and help, so the Spartans have a strong reputation, and the Persians go, well, we need to get Athens beaten before the Spartans turn up, and therefore they acted too quickly, and this gave the Greeks an advantage. So what was the significance for the Greeks? Well, it stopped the Persians in their western expansion and safeguarded Attica, so strategically it's really important. It's a huge boost to Athenian morale and the belief that the gods were on their side. It also raised their prestige, the Athenian prestige, with other Greek states. It did prove that the Persians weren't invincible. Now, the Persian Empire was so vast at this stage, they defeated so many people. There was a feeling, and we saw with the putting down the Ionian revolt, there was this feeling that ultimately the Persians would just steamroller whoever they took on. Now that kind of myth has been taken away, and this is going to be really important for future conflict between the Greeks and the Persians. The Spartans got something out of it, despite arriving too late. It gave them a chance to closely inspect Persian armor and weaponry on the battlefield, and therefore get their tactics ready for when they would fight the Persians later on. The mound where the Greek dead were buried became a key kind of site and important in terms of symbolism and religious ideas around this. It strengthened the Greek idea in democracy. In terms of the actions that had taken place, and this idea of democracy versus tyranny. However, the Greeks largely failed to see the future danger that Persia posed, and failed to use this as an opportunity to unite. What was the significance for Persia? Well, it stopped Darius's attempt for westward expansion and dominance over the Greeks. But these plans were simply delayed, they weren't ended. His son Xerxes would later invade Greece with a much bigger force built on the preparations that Darius started in the immediate aftermath of Marathon. Darius himself was planning to invade, but he dies in 1486, and there was other things that kind of got in the way, like an uprising in Egypt. But Xerxes would come, and Xerxes would come with force, and we'll look at this in later videos, and we'll have kind of really important battles at that point, like Thermopylae. Revenge on Athens became a key Persian goal. So Athens been marked down twice now for following the Ionian revolt, and now with the Battle of Marathon as the key enemy. And even in defeat, the Persians will have learnt a lot about how the Greeks fought, and would use this to try and work out future plans on how to take Greece, and thinking about combined military and naval operations, particularly around the northern part of the Aegean, to try and work out, right, okay, we can't just fight them like this. This is what we need to do to make ourselves more effective. Now, one of the other big things that there's often talks about with Marathon, obviously, is that the connection to the race. If you're older than like me, it's what they used to call particular chocolate bar as well. So you might all call it a Snickers. To me, it always will be a marathon. Right. So did the battle lead to this modern day race? Well, the account of Herodotus does make a link between the battle and long distance running. So Herodotus in Book 6, Chapter 105.1 says the generals first sent to Sparta the herald Philippides, an Athenian and long distance runner who made this his calling. The story then goes he encounters Pan on his journey, and Pan tells him that everything's going to be good, and then he runs if he ran to Sparta in a day, that's about 250 kilometers. again, this is one of the bits where we kind of go, Herodotus, is that quite right? But then Herodotus then writes in Book 6, Chapter 105.3, ever since that message, they appropriated him, Pan, with annual sacrifices and a torch race. So we immediately got a connection between Marathon and a race. Now, the other link that's made between the battle and the long distance running is the story that a messenger ran from Marathon to Athens to proclaim the Athenian victory. The distance is roughly, slightly shorter than, but roughly the distance that's then used in the modern day race. And in some versions of the story, that the person making this run then dies from exhaustion as they get there. But obviously, it's important that the Athenians know that they've won, and that essentially that the army are coming back, just because they knew that, as we looked at earlier, the Persians were en route. So there's two possible connections there that make go, well, actually, the foundation of this modern day race does go all the way back to the ancient world. I think a lot of marathon runners out there will probably be favouring the second story on the first one, because I'm not sure anybody wants to run a 250-kilometre marathon, though there might be some ultra runners out there who would. So thank you very much for watching. I hope that's been helpful to you and given you some insight into the Battle of Marathon. Remember, in writing about your studies of these key bits of A-level ancient history, it's really important that you keep on referencing and making use of the ancient sources. In this case, the ancient source we've got is Herodotus, which is why this video has been littered with connections to that. There are lots more ancient history videos to come. There's also loads of videos on various other bits of history on here, particularly aimed at those studying A-level history. There's also tons and tons of stuff on British and American politics, if you're interested in that, or studying A-level politics. So if you haven't done so already, please do subscribe. Any comments or questions, then leave them below. And thank you very much for watching.